guys, how's it going? It's Al. Week 5 wide receiver rankings. This is number 1 through number 24 for your season-long fantasy start-sit questions. This is why I do these rankings, to try and help you make your lineups to beat your idiot friends in your fantasy football league at home. We're gonna go from top to bottom. I'm going to outline the guys that I have ranked on my projections for this week. These are salary agnostic. So for those of you who follow me for daily fantasy advice, this has nothing to do with DFS. Now, you could take these rankings and then apply the salaries to where I have these players and say, well, this player, Al, has 8th, but this is just a random number, but he's like 15th in salary, and find value that way. That's certainly a viable way to do it. But these absolutely nothing to do with any of the salaries that exist on FanDuel or DraftKings. They are basically to help people make decisions. And if you have 3 players at wide receiver that you have to play this week, and you want to know which 2 should you start, you should start the 2 that I've ranked higher, basically. So let's go.
He's a legend.
The Smiz Gang Listener League is posted for week 5, and it is way bigger. It's week 5, so they made it 5,500 people. This thing has filled really early the last 2 weeks. It's filled like midday to evening, like dinner time on Friday afternoon. They've added 1,000 seats to it. It's probably still gonna fill early by like midday Saturday to Saturday evening. So make sure that you reserve your entries quickly. Smizzle.tv/links has your link to join the league. This is not a lobby game. You cannot get in there by going to DraftKings. You have to use my link. The Smizzle.tv/links link is right there for you down below in the description if you click show more, or if you go to the comment section, right in the pinned comment, there will be a link to that link tree that will take you there to get into the listener league. $10 entry fee, 3 max, absolutely no rake. The best tournament on DraftKings. Go to smizzle.tv/links and join it now. Okay, let's get started, but I can go pretty quickly through like the top 5 or 6 because they're not all that different from week to week. Number 1 is Cooper Kupp for obvious reasons. The guy is getting targeted a metric ton every week except week 3 where he got 6 targets. Like, saw his absolute floor of 16.4 DraftKings points, 19 targets in week 4 against San Francisco, like one of the best defenses in the league, maybe one of the best defenses ever. Cooper Kupp sits at number 1. Number 2 is going to be Justin Jefferson. Had a pretty big day, 13 targets and a rushing touchdown, 147 yards against New Orleans. People thought that Marshawn Lattimore was going to maybe stop him. Lattimore has something with Mike Evans, but he is a good cornerback. But this is why I keep telling you guys, be cognizant of wide receiver cornerback matchups. But when it comes to the projections, those are already baked in. So don't double count against your wide receivers when they are in a matchup against a tough cornerback. So it's not like anybody was sitting Justin Jefferson in that game. If you had him, you were playing him, and that's just going to be the way it is. He's number 2. Number 3 right behind him is Steph Diggs, coming off of a kind of a disappointing game. Got enough volume against Miami, just didn't really produce in week 3, but week 4 in the rain and the wind only caught 4 catches on 6 targets. He stays pretty much right where I need him here. Much heightened touchdown expectation this week in Buffalo against Pittsburgh. This is a get right spot for Steph Diggs. At number 4, Tyreek Hill. Yes, he gets a downgrade in quarterback going from Tua to Teddy Bridgewater. So like the downfield throws may not be as on target. Like if he's open 2 or 3 times in a game on throws that would be over 20 or 25 yards, his efficiency on those might come down. But as we saw on the Island game against Cincinnati, Teddy Bridgewater has eyes for Tyreek Hill, and he is just going to throw the ball in Tyreek's direction more often than not. 14 targets in that game, many of them coming after Tua suffered the unfortunate injury that he suffered. So Tyreek Hill at number 4, mountain of volume with massive upside, week winner every time he takes the field potentially. Devontae Adams right behind him, lots of targets, double-digit targets in 3 of the 4 games this year, got the 100 yards for you twice, touchdowns in 3 of the 4 games, a very solid wide receiver who is going to sit at the top half of the wide receiver ones pretty much every single week, just based on how talented he is and how much the Raiders offense relies on going through him. But defenses are starting to really roll that coverage this way, and we have Carr not being as talented a quarterback as Aaron Rodgers. shocker, right? Like, I'm really going far on a limb when I say that, but like, that's the reality of this situation. So the consistency from Davante Adams just hasn't been there. 141 yards in week 1, 12 in week 2, 36 in week 3, then 101 in week 4. So he comes to 5 because, and Tyreek moves past him for those reasons, at least for me. Jamar Chase coming in at number 6. We have not seen him unlock his big play potential that he has in him every single time he takes the field. A lot like Tyreek Hill, he's an outlier when it comes to getting downfield. However, the Cincinnati offensive line has not given Joe Burrow even the protection that it gave him last year, when it was just, well, I'm just going to chuck it up there and Jamar's down there somewhere and he'll just figure it out. He hasn't been vertical long enough to make those decisions. Now, if the Miami game is any indication, maybe this offensive line is starting to gel. This 60% changed new offensive line is really starting to gel after a month together. And as that happens, I think we're going to see more big games out of Jamar Chase. Baltimore starting possibly to get a little bit more healthy at cornerback. They've been a team that we've been trying to attack all year long because of the injuries that they've sustained in their defensive backfield. Jamar Chase sitting right here. I really like him this week. And if you like this video, please drop a like on it, subscribe to the channel, ring the notifications bell. We passed 5,000 subs. You guys have been tremendous. Let's see how quickly we can get from 5,000 to 6,000. I think we might get there maybe by the middle of next week, but I need your help to do it. So thank you guys for being here. We drop like 5 videos on this channel every single week on the fantasy football channel, and I don't want you to miss any of them. So make sure that you subscribe and ring the notifications bell. My number 7 wide receiver is going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown, because I am expecting that ankle injury not to be something that is going to linger. They square off against New England in this game, and while New England may try to bleed clock with their backup quarterback and double running backs against Detroit, nothing hurts a wide receiver when their team gives up the most points in the league and they always have to throw the football. So Amon-Ra, since I don't know what, week 10 of last season, has been just a monster target getter. Double-digit targets in like every game but one. 8 catches and tied the league record as far as that was concerned, until he caught only 6 balls against Minnesota for 73 yards back in week 3. Missed week 4. He is cementing himself as a wide receiver 1, and if healthy, is above a lot of other superstar. Like, he's at this point one of the guys in the category of league winners if you drafted him at his ADP. As opposed to somebody like Deebo Samuel, who is right behind him for me this week at number 8, coming off a tremendous game against the Rams. Deebo getting the targets that we want from him, big playability as always because of his tackle breaking ability, yards after contact, ability to break tackles and extend plays, just like he did that ridiculous play where he caught the DB, jumped for an interception, missed it. He comes down with that ball, goes across the field, steps right through a Jalen Ramsey attempted tackle, and scampers for a 57-yard touchdown. They are not using him on the ground as much as they did last year, and that's a good thing if you are a Deebo Samuel manager, because you want Deebo to get 7 to 10 targets every week. Targets are way more valuable than rushing attempts. You want them to run with him a little bit, just because getting the ball in his hands always has the potential of a bigger play, but targets worth way more than carries. I love the way that they are utilizing Deebo Samuel, and the fact that I don't root for injury. Obviously, I was a big Trey Lance supporter. I would like to see what he can do as a starting quarterback, but Deebo Samuel with Jimmy Garoppolo as his quarterback, it's a better situation for Deebo. More opportunity for touchdowns when they get inside the 5-yard line, and more passing efficiency when you look at Jimmy G over Trey Lance. So big up arrow for Deebo with Jimmy G entrenched at quarterback over Trey Lance since that injury. He's my number 8. Number 9 is AJ Brown. Great spot here against Arizona. Total of 49.5 in this game. Eagles are favored by 5. They should score points. One of the higher team totals on the week. 27.5, I believe, is their team total in this one. He's been the number 1 target, whether because Jalen Hurts went to his kid's birthday party, whether they went to Disneyland, they've been friends forever, they wanted to play together. So like, AJ Brown is his number 1 guy, and this offense is completely humming. This is a fantastic offense that is very difficult to defend because of the physical abilities of Jalen Hurts, who has been much more efficient through the air than anybody had given him credit for after his couple of game audition 2 years ago and his starting the entire season last year. AJ Brown has brought about this big uptick in terms of helping Jalen Hurts progress as an efficient quarterback. So I have him at number 9 this week. really solid floor of targets, 7, 10, 8, and 13, progressing backwards from weeks 4 through 1. Definitely an alpha wide receiver, and this is where I've got him this week. Behind him, I have Courtland Sutton at number 10, playing on Thursday Night Football against the Colts. Not a lot of points expected, but Sutton is from that game, it's got a total of like 43. Both defenses very solid. They both want to run the football. We'll see if Jonathan Taylor is playing, but Courtland Sutton has commanded a ton of targets in this Broncos offense. By far the leading target getter over Jerry Jeudy. 10 targets in 2 of their 4 games, and one from a running open perspective, right? Like there's a metric that is out that says, which quarterbacks are open the most, and Courtland Sutton is like top 3 in the league. I think he's number 2, in fact, in terms of percentage of the time that he is actually open, and he has a higher ADOT than like Jerry Jeudy. He runs more down the field. So not only is he open, not only is he getting the most targets, but there's big play, big splash ability with Courtland Sutton. He is going to win somebody a week more often than he will not. So like he is definitely a wide receiver 1 for me. And another big play wide receiver, something that I love to see, was Mike Evans getting back on the field this week. I also love the fact that Chris Godwin was back on the field this week, because that improves Tom Brady's expectation. He needs wide receivers to be the quarterback that he can be at this point in his career. Tom Brady is no longer an elevator of talent. Okay. I don't think that that's really a hot take. It's like a 45-year-old quarterback is not going to be an elevator of talent like a Josh Allen, in his early to mid 20s, or Patrick Mahomes, any of those guys who are going to make their wide receivers better. Tom Brady was that guy for a while, but now he is entirely, and has been for like 5, 6, 7 years, reliant on his wide receiver core for him to be able to post big numbers. And thankfully, Tampa Bay has that, led by Mike Evans. And you saw it in that game while they were playing from behind a ton. In week 1, 71 yards, 7 targets, 1 touchdown. In week 4, after the suspension for the fight with Lattimore, 10 targets, 8 catches, 103 yards, 2 touchdowns. Mike Evans is the guy when it comes to creating touchdowns at the wide receiver position for the last 3 seasons in NFL. He's the number 1 guy in terms of receptions for touchdowns, and he makes Tom Brady his job much easier. And Tom Brady appreciates that, fires the ball at Mike Evans a ton. He is my wide receiver 11 on the week in a game against Atlanta. Big favorites here, 8 points for the Buccaneers. T. Higgins comes in as my wide receiver 12. He has been feasting this season, and he has been feasting a long time, like since the middle of last season. 9 targets in week 4, 7 targets in week 3, 10 targets in week 2, 2 touchdowns over those 3 games, but kind of gets dinged because he's not the alpha in this offense. That's Jamar Chase. But what we're seeing in this new NFL, right, the NFL of 2022 has really evolved. It started like 10 years ago, where teams were starting to rely more on the passing game because of the rules around the passing game that had changed, and it became more of a passing league. You see teams that throw way over their expectation in neutral game script situations and on early downs. But teams didn't have this much talent at the wide receiver 2, with very few exceptions, like the Greatest Show on Turf Rams and teams like that threw the ball a whole lot and really had a lot of talent at wide receiver. T. Higgins would be a number 1 on like 25 teams in this league. He plays on a team where he gets to be, this is a benefit for him to be the wide receiver 2. He runs against single coverage. He runs against the team's second best cornerback, which, unless you're like the Philadelphia Eagles with like Bradbury and Slay, that second cornerback is a massive downgrade. Also, defenses have to roll away from him to go guard Jamar Chase over the top, which means that T. Higgins has averaged more catches for more yards per game for like the last 10 games than has Jamar Chase. And now we're seeing those touchdowns materialize, averaging a half a touchdown a game, 28.4 points against Miami. He remains an elite option who was drafted at the back end of the second round, top end of the third. He's my wide receiver 12 on the week. We are charging through this fundraiser for No Kid Hungry, thanks to all of the contributions from the Smiz gang. That means you. Every single dollar helps, and we've had contributions as small as $1 up to $5,000. Whatever you can muster up to give goes a long way. We are shooting for $50,000 raised for No Kid Hungry, and every $10,000 our community raises, I will be matching $10,000 myself to give us a total together of $100,000 raised for food insecure kids all across the United States. Every donation you make is 100% tax deductible. All the donations go through smizzle.tv/charity, which is run by Tiltify, who will send you all of the tax documentation that you need, as every single dollar you donate is 100% tax deductible. So please give today and be a part of something bigger than yourself. Getting back at it with number 13, I will take CeeDee Lamb in this spot. It really didn't matter who his quarterback is. CeeDee Lamb is commanding a ton of targets, 8 targets, 12, 11, 11 every single week this year. Scoring has not been a problem with Cooper Rush, with a touchdown in each of the last 2 games. Has not ticked 100 yards yet this year, but based on that volume, that will not be something that he gets held from. 87 yards in week 3, 97 yards in week 4. They square off against the Rams this week, so it's going to be a tough matchup, as he'll catch some of Jalen Ramsey, but they move him around enough that Ramsey won't follow him all over the field, I suspect. He will catch a good amount of him when he's lined up on the outside, but they do run him out of the slot from time to time. He is going to get volume no matter where he lands in a play. Jalen Waddle at 14, kind of getting the same sort of a situation that T. Higgins got, where there is an alpha on the other side who gets all of the, the main cornerback from everybody else and gets defenses rolled over the top. So he gets to run in one-on-one coverage on the other side. We've seen this also from the Eagles with Devontae Smith getting that same sort of coverage. These uber talented wide receivers now falling in as the wide receiver 2 on a lot of teams kind of seems not fair. So Jalen Waddle, 100 yards in 2 of the 4 games this year. Not really going to see double-digit targets in most games, but his big playability keeps him right here. And speaking of big playability, at 15, I have DK Metcalf coming off of a fantastic game. Geno Smith has actually been good, and I don't know what to do with that, because Geno Smith has never been that good, and he might not be able to unlock DK Metcalf on a week in, week out basis, right? 36 yards in week 1, 35 in week 2, 64 in week 3, with no catch over 20 yards in those 3 games. But he sure as hell unlocked him against Detroit. Maybe that's just Detroit. So they get New Orleans this week, coming off of a week where they just gave up a ton of yards and catches to Justin Jefferson. DK Metcalf, obviously a different type of wide receiver than Justin Jefferson. More big, more beefy, less separation, but more contested catches than Justin Jefferson. We will see if he can have a second big week in a row, coming off of a 7-catch, 149-yard performance the last week in week 4. Christian Kirk is my number 16, just peppered with targets constantly, and squares off against Houston, who just is not a good defense, coming off of another 9-target game where he did not produce. The 2 catches for 60 yards was a little bit of a disappointment, only 8.3 PPR points for him last week against Philadelphia, but really tough defense. I'm probably going to ignore most game logs against Philadelphia this year. And when you factor in that they were in a complete monsoon last week with rain and wind and everything else, I'm just going to tick that one off and ignore it. And I'm going to pay attention to the 9 targets, 6 targets, 12 targets that he got the 3 previous weeks, with over 12, 13 yards per catch and 3 touchdowns over that 3-week span. I'm going to leave last week out. 16 is a good spot for me for Christian Kirk. Right behind him, I have Tyler Lockett, who is just getting a good amount of targets every single week. Now, while it's going to be tougher for Geno to maybe unlock DK Metcalf's big playability on a week in, week out basis, Tyler Lockett, not the same type of guy. Runs more short and intermediate routes. He can get loose deep, but that's not really how they utilize him. DK is a downfield guy, and the lower A-dot throws go to Tyler Lockett, which are easier to convert those targets into catches. 9 catches on 11 targets in week 2 against a tough San Francisco defense. 9 catches on 11 targets in week 3. 6 catches on 8 targets in week 4. Tyler Lockett is going to get a really high total of targets. There are only 2 guys that get really peppered. I know Disley has wandered into the end zone a couple of times this year, and they throw the ball a little bit to their running backs, but not all that much. So really, all of the throws that Geno is tossing, and he may have to throw it 35 times a game, are going to go to Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. So really solid floor here. He's going to have to wiggle away from somebody to have a really monstrous game. I don't know if he's going to be a week winner. He always has those 2 or 3 games a year where he is a week winner. I just don't know if it's as much in his profile at this point, but really solid floor. And you got to respect that as a wide receiver too. We need guys that just put up points and don't put up goose eggs. Speaking of that, Brandon Cooks. 18.7 points last week, 7 targets or more in all 4 games this year. Nobody likes playing Brandon Cooks. He's a 6th round pick basically every single year, and he does nothing other than provide you with a good floor of targets every single week. It's up to Davis Mills's efficiency on that day, as he's had 2 solid days, 15 and 18 PPR points, one with 9.4, then the stinker against Chicago at Chicago, where he caught 2 of 7 balls. So solid receiver, not flashy, but solid. But then on the complete other side of that argument is my number 18, and that's going to be, sorry, my number 19, and that's going to be Chris Olave, leading the league by a lot in terms of air yards. Now, air yards become realistic when you get a ton of targets. And I know that some people don't like air yards. I know that some people don't really weight air yards, but air yards are basically opportunity. And that opportunity, when it's realized, becomes a week winner for your team. We want targets, and we want a volume of targets. And over the last 3 weeks, Chris Olave has averaged 11 targets a game. When you couple the amount of targets that he's getting with the type of targets that they are, big downfield throws, got an end zone target last week against Minnesota, I think that the talent's going to win out here, especially if we get a return from Jameis Winston. He did not see that, like a big precipitous drop going from Winston to Andy Dalton, but Winston's profile fits Olave's skill set pretty much perfectly, as Olave wants to get deep and Winston wants to chuck it. So big games coming from Olave, and that volume of targets really gives him a heightened floor from where you would think not an exclusively downfield guy, but a downfield option should get. So Olave, love him here at 19. Marquise Brown behind him at number 20. Doesn't get the credit for being as good as he's been because of the volume that he's gotten. He is the main cog in this offense. Rondale Moore came back and played like 85% of the snaps, just took over his old job immediately. AJ Brown's been hurt. Obviously, Nuke Hopkins has been suspended for the first half of the season, essentially. And Marquise Brown has just taken over a massive volume role in this offense. Safe wide receiver 2 play against the Eagles here. Obviously, the Eagles are one of the more tough defenses out there and are very tough on the outside with Slay and Bradbury. But Marquise Brown is just going to get a high volume of targets, and you cannot ignore it. Speaking of a high volume of his team's market share of targets, Drake London is getting 32% of the target market share for Atlanta. The problem is Atlanta has thrown it 39 times together the last 2 weeks. We need Atlanta's offense to have to throw the ball. And thankfully, they play Tampa Bay this week. Now, I know Tampa Bay gave up a lot of rushing yards against Kansas City, but in the 3 games prior to that, they had not given up over like 90 yards rushing in any of those 3 games. So this is still a tough defense to run on, and teams do have to pass against them, added to the fact that Atlanta projects to be behind in this game. They are 8-point underdogs. When you are playing from behind, you tend against Tampa Bay on the road. They're going to have to throw, and when Mariota drops back to throw, he looks Drake London's way. So really solid floor of targets this week. Big targets too. He is a 6'4", 215-pound guy. When they get near the end zone, if and when they get near the end zone, he is going to look Drake London's way, especially with the absence of Cordell Patterson, who landed on IR. So could be some more red zone usage for him, and let's pray for Kyle Pitts, who might get a couple of red zone targets as well. I don't know. I'm so frustrated with Kyle Pitts. Chris Godwin is next, coming off of a 10-target game where he caught 7 balls against the Kansas City Chiefs. 12.9 fantasy points is extremely respectable, and now gets a fantastic matchup against the Atlanta Falcons. Now, he is not going to have as much red zone or end zone usage as his compatriot Mike Evans, but is going to manage the short and intermediate routes from Tom Brady this week in a game where they're expected to score 28.5 points. Adam Thielen comes in as my number 23. Nobody likes to play Adam Thielen. Like, you know, he's old. He doesn't do anything flashy. He's not, but he gets the same situation that we were talking about with all of those other guys. He is a solid professional wide receiver, 17 targets the last 2 weeks, 14 catches and a touchdown. He does not have the big playability that he had a few years ago. That just is not a part of his skill set anymore, but big red zone target guy, great route runner, 15.2 points last week, 18.1 the week before. He is a confident wide receiver to play with all of the attention, and rightfully so, going to Justin Jefferson. And filling it out here, I'm going to keep Deontay Johnson as my wide receiver 24. So I know he did not have a lot of targets last week. I think that people are putting way too much weight on the market share of targets that went anywhere after they switched quarterbacks to Kenny Pickett. Now, Pickett may have eyes for Pickens, and he may throw it to him more because he's a good wide receiver, and you know they're both rookies, and maybe they've got a bond and whatever else. Deontay Johnson gets open, and quarterbacks will always throw it to the guy who is open. I think 4 targets will be the floor that we see on the season from Deontay Johnson. They do play against Buffalo. They are 14-point underdogs. They project to play from behind. And you're going to get, in my opinion, another 8 to 12 target game out of Deontay Johnson. And hopefully he can break one and scoot for a touchdown to give us some bigger upside from him. A return to the mid-teens is very likely just on volume alone for yards and catches when you're playing full PPR, as I do. And I wish you the best of luck in your lineups this week. Look out for another video right there.
He's a legend.